In the previous video, we were taking a React component and then embedding it inside a Blaze template. Now in this video, we'll do the whole chain of components from what you see on the screen all the way up to the router. And so that's a little more complex, but it's also more interesting. So let's simply go up the chain, and then I'll go into more details. So the first component we have is the video component. And what we're doing here is we're using a kind of a smart and dumb component relationship, or you can call it controller components or container components. Basically what's going on is this video component only cares about receiving data. You can see right here it expects a video object, and it then renders that data as HTML, and that's pretty much its whole role, its whole job. It's not worried about subscribing to data. It's not worried about getting the data from Meteor. It just gets data in and then render HTML. Thus the name DOM component. Now this DOM component will then be called from a smart or container component, which in this case I've called a video page. And that component does manage data. So you can see right here it has this get Meteor data function where it receives data from Minimongo. And all it does is then forward that data onto the video component, which we just saw right here. So here actually, video equals this data.video. Of course, there's some more logic to see if it meets all the conditions that we have and so on, but in essence, it's just doing data management. Now, this video page component gets called from the app component. And the app component is the one that subscribes to all our subscriptions, all our global subscriptions, I should say. Basically just like the app layout that we had in Blaze. And then in turn, this one gets called from the router right here. So before we had Blaze layout.render app and then main video page, and now it's very similar. We have React layout.render app, the name of the component, and content will be video page. Very similar principle. So yeah, that's the whole chain, which works. You can see the video page being rendered. If I open a new incognito window, meaning I won't be logged in, it will display login link right here. So it's not displaying the login page because I haven't implemented that in React yet, but you know, the basic features are all there. A small note, if you click, you can see it renders a bit weird. It renders twice because, well, you're not supposed to use both Blaze layout and React layout in the same app with FlowRouter. That doesn't work. So for this video's sake, I'm just going to leave it like that, at least for now. But yeah, if this were your production app, you might want to find a workaround. For example, including some templates from Blaze or doing something like that. But anyway, for now, let's not worry about that. And instead, let's go over the code. So I wanted to give you an overview first, but now let's dig into the details of each component. So as a refresher, here's the Blaze video page component. So as you can see, by the way, the first thing I did was import the React component from the Blaze template. So I just reused the same principle as in the previous video, where we're switching out bits of the app one at a time. And but now we don't need this component at all because it's all React. So just to recap, you can see it was checking for the login, and then if it had permission, it was displaying the video, which is right here. This is the video. So there's a bunch of HTML, which is pretty self-explanatory. Oh, one thing that's important to note here, this dangerously set inner HTML property. So this is the equivalent of the triple curly brackets in Blaze, right? If you do that in Blaze, it means interpret the contents as HTML and not as a string, which obviously is dangerous because it exposes you to what's it called? Cross-site scripting attacks and all kind of security holes. So for that reason, Blaze makes a difference between double curly brackets and triple curly brackets, and React goes even further by calling the property used to set the inner HTML dangerously set inner HTML. So why do we do this? Just because we want to parse the markdown content. Now, in this specific case, it's okay because the content that we're parsing comes from us, right? It's a video description, which, you know, I wrote, and it's hard coded in the database, like, or even maybe probably in a text file actually. So yeah, there's no security issue here. Obviously, if this was user-generated content, you'd want like a sanitizing step here. So anyway, that's why it's dangerously set inner HTML. Another thing to notice that's a bit different in Blaze, you have this really convenient each helper, right? You don't have that in React, or rather in JSX. So what you do instead is you take the object that you want to iterate on, in this case, this props video.resources, which is this list of links right here. And then you call a function on it using map. This is just plain JavaScript, by the way. In this case, the function is this render resource, which is here, and this is what gets called on each iteration and actually displays the list of links. One thing to note also, React always wants you to specify a key. So that's what we're doing here with the index, just the index of the array item. So yeah, if you don't specify a key, it will throw an error. You should be able to see it. It will just ask for one. So that's something that's really cool with React. The errors are really explicit. It usually tells you like not only that something's wrong, but also how to fix it, which is very different from Blaze, which tells you something is wrong and like good luck to find where it's coming from. Well, sometimes at least. Yeah, so while that's reloading, let's go up the chain. So this is the video component. Again, a dump component. It's called from the video page component. So this one is interesting because we get our first glimpse of get Meteor data, which is how you kind of interface between Meteor and React. So what do I mean by that? Well, in Blaze, we're used to being able to use reactive variables like session variables or user or collection data basically anywhere. It will just work, and if it's a reactive context, it will, you know, re-render or rerun as need be. Now React doesn't work like that, at least not yet. Maybe that's coming. I don't know if that's actually a good idea. But in any case, what you do is you put all your reactive dependencies in this getMeteorData thing, which returns a data object, which you can then use anywhere in your React component. So in other words, instead of doing like session get book right here, you do it here. And I actually think it's, you know, it's a decent system. Like, obviously it's a little bit more code, but on the other hand, you do have all your reactive stuff centralized in one place, which also has its advantages. So why not? So that's the first thing we do. we need to include it as a mixin. Then we define our reactive data sources. And then it's very similar to what we had in the video page Blaze template, where we first test to see if a user exists. If not, we show the login link. If it does, we then test to see if the user has permission to access the product. If yes, we show the product. If not, the upgrade link. And by the way, like the upgrade link, login, all these things have actual templates, but they're still Blaze. I haven't converted them, so these are more like placeholders. A few things to note here. The layout thing, it's exactly what we were doing before with the layout block helper, except in JSX, we can just pretend it's like an HTML tag, so opening tag and closing tag works great. And I'll show you the layout template right after. We call the video component. Again, we give it a key. Another thing, here we have this component did mount callback, which is very similar to Blaze's rendered callback, or unrendered rather. And that's where that's what triggers after the component is rendered, and the DOM nodes exist. And in this case, I'm calling this fitvids jQuery plugin to resize the video to make it fluid. So yeah, that's, well, usually, so like React people will usually tell you to avoid jQuery if you can, but in this case, I couldn't really find a pure React equivalent, so I'm just doing it like that. So the layout is right here. Super simple. So all it does is render a bunch of HTML. There's two other components, header and footer, which are also pretty simple. Just static HTML. One thing to note in the layout is this thing here, this props children. And this props children will show you the contents of the tag. So you know, if you had like a plain HTML tag like strong, right? The tag can have attributes, you know, foo equals bar, but then it also has some inner content, right? And this inner content in React is available as props.children. So when we call the layout component, passing it this stuff as children, it gets rendered in place of this placeholder, this props children. So that's good to know. That's how you do layouts and stuff like that in React. So we've seen a video page. Now we're going one level up the chain once more, and we come to app. So when looking at a component, I find it useful to start from the render function, because it usually tells you what it does. So in this case, it checks for this data ready. If this is true, it renders this props content, and if not, it renders this.showLoading, which is right here and just shows a loading indicator. Now this.props.content is what comes from FlowRouter, from the React layout call. So when we say content video page, that's what gets inserted right here. In other words, you know, it's the same thing as having this. And obviously it changes with the route. So that's how we do our routing. Now the important part is this, right? How do we know when data is ready? And it's right here in our get Meteor data function. We have a bunch of subscriptions, which we all store in an array. And then we use the every function of underscore to basically check, you know, when every subscription returns true, returns ready. If that happens, we set a session variable, in this case book, and then we say data.ready equals true. So the only other thing we do is kind of load some fonts with Typekit or Google Fonts, I'm not sure. And we do that again on component did mount, which triggers once the DOM is ready. So yeah, that's how we handle our subscriptions. So you'll note they're not template level subscriptions because they're global to the app anyway. So I'm not sure quite yet like how you handle template level subscriptions in a React component, because obviously you can't just put them on the template like Blaze. Blaze has this special feature. I don't think React has that, but anyway, we'll see that in a later video. So yeah, there you have it. That's the whole chain of components. It's it's not perfect code right here. Like, this thing is a bit messy. I'm sure it could be streamlined a bit, maybe generalized a bit somehow. But we're getting there. As I said, it's kind of an iterative process. So who knows? Stuff I did in this video might get improved or maybe even rolled back. Who knows, in later episodes. But anyway, sorry for the longer video, but I think it's worth spending some time on this stuff because we're getting into serious React things. And even for me, like, I'm no React expert by any means, so I'm kind of learning as we go. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for the rest of the series.